All right, good morning, everybody. So we're going to be going through a quick demo of two different topics I've been working on in the past couple weeks since I'm on triage this week. The first one will be using GitLab as a Terraform backend. I saw it mentioned in one of the shout out channels and realized we hadn't actually gone over it specifically on our team to kind of show how it works. I'll do that real quick, and then wanted to go into an issue that isn't fully closed yet, but we're working on adding a UBI version of the alpine-certificates container so that we can better support the UBI deployments in the charts. So I'll start off with the Terraform with GitLab example here. There's a really great documentation page on the docs site about how to set it up. So we're actually implementing that in Orchestrator now. This was merged in. What you have to do to actually leverage this is just change some of the configuration in the RC file. So instead of backend GCS, we'll be using backend as GitLab. And then we provide some GitLab environment variables here. If using this in CI, this becomes even easier because most of these are pre-provided for you. So you can just kind of map them like that. So to do a quick demo of this, I just created an empty project. One note that came up when I was working with Robert on this is that a totally empty project can be used as a Terraform backend. It doesn't have to be configured as a backend through the CI. It's actually kind of like container registry or any other kind of artifact repository on this project. You can inject it directly there. So mostly I just need a project ID from here. So I'll put that in the GitLab project ID in my RC file. And I already generated an access token with API scope. And then this is actually the URL to access the Terraform backend. If you want to see what it looks like, right now it's empty because I haven't initialized it yet, but it's just one of the API endpoints that you can hit with the project ID and the name of the project, and you can actually see the backend state. We'll see that populate here in a second. So these are all generic. I've just added a quick vault password file with some random string. I actually don't have a license for this. And then Google credentials JSON is from my GCP project. And these are all default. I just set a different Terraform prefix for the resources that'll get spun up. So I've already built the dev container locally, so I'll just go ahead and run it. And then I will provision the cluster. You've seen all this before. This will look exactly like if you had the default GCS backend before, but actually looks like there's an issue. Sometimes I have to go remove all the Terraform backend to make sure that's gone. Just going to recreate the project real quick to make sure there's no backend state that's locked back there. Actually did this before the demo, but it looks like I have to do it one more time. Just make a new empty project. So we'll have a new project ID now. API token should stay the same. Project name stayed the same. This should be good now. We'll update this link to use the new project ID. You can see here it finished provisioning. So if I refresh this page, you'll see all the Terraform state here. So this is exactly what would be stored in your GCP bucket, for example, but all the results are kind of stored on this GitLab project now. And so you can use this project to store your backend. Of course, you can store different endpoints, etc. But that's how we can use GitLab as a Terraform backend, which is really handy. I tend to do this recently just to make sure I don't collide different projects when I'm deploying Orchestrator. It's a little bit easier for me to just throw up a quick GitLab project than to click around in the GCP UI and create a new bucket, etc. So that was just a quick demo of this functionality. Any questions on this one?
Pretty handy, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll jump into the next one. So this issue was opened a little while ago by Hussein. So this one is to build the UBI-based version of alpine-certificates. Right now, alpine-certificates is in almost every pod that's deployed as part of the charts. But as of right now, there's no UBI specific version of it. So it's a bit limiting if you're trying to deploy a fully UBI version of the charts. So the first portion of this change is to actually go into the CNG and create a new Docker file for UBI certificates. So you can see here we just add a new Docker file UBI-8 and add a new script for bundle certificates. So what we're going to do in here, the meat of this is, I'll blow this up a little bit so you can see it. Effectively, the new Docker file just starts from Red Hat UBI, copies in this bundle certificates UBI script, which we'll talk about in a second, and it prepares the volume that'll be shared, and then sets the entry point command here. So the script is actually really simple. It's a little bit simpler than the Alpine version of it because there's a lot more dereferencing to do. The UBI certificates container actually comes with some pre-configured CAs and certificates set up in the SSL certs. So we just remove that, all the content in there, and then we update CA trust. This is actually just a script that's built into the UBI-based image that runs PKI11 and injects files into this directory. So what we'll just do is copy them out into this etc/SSL certs directory. This is kind of the common one. etc/SSL certs will work between UBI or non-UBI based images. So this will keep it consistent with how the Alpine certificates script will dereference all the certificates into that one bundle. And so to save time, I just went ahead and deployed this. This is my custom configuration for the chart. So this is generic cert manager. This is my host domain. Here is where I set the certificate image and tag. Instead of using the Alpine certificate default one, I use the repository and tag that Jason actually triggered a build to build the changes that I made here into an image. So I'm just pulling that here. And then to do further testing, I'm also injecting a custom CA, which I'll show you in a second. I just grabbed one from a previous job where I knew how to access it. Like I said, there's a set of custom CAs that are actually built into the UBI image, but of course we want to test to make sure that end customers could actually inject their own or ones that they're dependent on to make sure that they can reach resources in the containers through that custom certificate authority. And then just to pick one, deploying with UBI requires a bunch of work at the outset because you have to set up your own external resources, for example, Postgres and stuff, to make sure that all the resources are available, and then just the core pods are deployed with UBI-8 tags. So to save time, I'm just going to kind of show you a specific sliver of deploying Task Runner with UBI-8 to make sure that the certificates are correctly passed into that final container in the Task Runner pod. And to prove that this works, I just started our vanilla base image UBI-8 to curl this GE endpoint just to prove that that cert doesn't work. The cert isn't trusted, and so it won't pull. And so what I can do here is now our task runner, part of the change in the chart, which I can show here, is to change the mount point where the custom CA would be mounted because it's a little bit different on Red Hat. So you can see here in the certificates template, we'll set a variable UBI to true if the global certificates image tag has a suffix of UBI-8, which you can see here it does. All of our UBI-8 images are appended with UBI-8 at the end to delineate the difference. And then if UBI-8 will actually run the security context run as user 0. I'm still working on this with Jason. This feels wrong. I'm going to see if there's a better way we can do this, but that directory that the update CA trust command actually touches is only writable by the root user. Being in the root group doesn't help. So at the moment we're setting run as user here. We're going to see if we can find a better way to do this. Also, if it's UBI, we'll set the mount path here. And if it's not UBI, just kind of Debian compatibility will mount here. Blow it up to make sure you can see it. So to prove that that worked, I will open up the definition for the pod for Task Runner, and I'll just search custom CA certificate so you can see the mount path was set correctly because we're in UBI right now. So it's set to user share PKI CA trust source anchors. And then here are the 3 containers in that pod. So you can see here the certificates image is using our UBI-8 and the logs show nothing. This might be something I touch before we actually merge this change. It would probably be helpful to prove some, provide some confirmation message that the certificates were dereferenced and bundled into that directory. So I think that might be a worthwhile change. And then in this final container here, the certs should have been provided in the bundle under So here's the bundle. Here's also the trust bundle, if that's kind of a more advanced version of getting certificates, but they're valuable too. So, but the main bundle is here, and our custom CA has been bundled into that bundle. So now if we run the curl command, it'll work. It's binary output because it's an image, but we no longer get an SSL authority problem. Any questions on that flow?
I do actually have one question for you, just related to this security problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any reason we can't just chown the folder? Like inside of the certificate's image, is there any reason that we can't simply chown it so that we have the ability to do it without being root?
You mean in the Docker file?
Yes.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. I think that would be a good way to do it. I don't see an issue having that directory be more open, especially because it's short-lived.
I haven't gotten a chance to go poke my fingers in. I've been a little busy with everything going on.
Mm-hmm.
But the question basically comes down to, why is what we're trying to do root limited only? And is there any reason that we need to have that constraint, considering what the Alpine, or what the certificates image, I should say, really does? So, I mean, if we can get around this just by effectively going, well, we may not run as root, we know it, here, blip, then that should be sufficient. The question around the second part of that is, why does it work in Alpine? And what do we have that's actually different between the two? Because we shouldn't have to run it as root explicitly, but at the same time, it should be able to run as root explicitly. It's not uncommon to have a container that does run as root to do something that makes it happy for the containers that run after it. But we should bump into something, or should have bumped into something from the Alpine version if this was going to be a real issue.
Yeah, I'll have to dig into what exactly the Alpine version is doing. It seems like it's mostly just creating links under etc SSL certs, which is pretty open to begin with, whereas the UBI version is actually inserting information under this directory, which is writable by the root user, but not the root group. So the permissions that we set on everything is to run as UID 1000. So it seems like that would explain why you can't write there, but I am curious how it's happening in Alpine. But to your point, yeah, I think showing it in the Docker file would make a lot of sense.
So for giggles, and since it'll be really quick anyways, why don't you Docker run on Alpine latest, and we'll just go see what that is.
Update CA certs, right?
Right, now when you just do an outright run, I believe you're running as root.
Right. I just wanted to see if, I think this is actually a binary, so it's a little bit different. We can't dig in and see exactly what it's doing.
Yeah. Effectively, yes. They have a pre-compiled binary version of what everybody else uses a Perl script for, but obviously Perl's big. So that's why. It's basically, it's a very, very tiny one. And essentially what it does is it goes back to the trusted roots that are in the CA certificate. So you may actually have to run, APK install CA certificates to get it to actually populate that content. But then it basically goes around and makes the symlinks from the trusted roots into etc SSL certs. Our Alpine certificates image then basically dereferences all of those and then adds in the CA and then regenerates the bundle. And then just, again, it's making sure that everything is dereferenced so that when we take it out, we're not pointing to some random place in the file system that may not be accurate, which is why technically you can use this image with UBI and it won't break. The Alpine one won't break the one for UBI images because it's placing the entire contents of etc SSL.
Makes sense.
So yeah, go ahead and run Alpine latest as root, and then we can always, swap to a different ID, because now we can just go ahead and do APK, add, sure, VI works, and CH certificates. You may have to do the update. I don't remember the command to tell it to update its indexes.
Oh yeah. Now it's happy. Just gonna go grab that cert. So the directory is there's problem 1.
Yeah, in Alpine, obviously, it's not going to be under PKI because it's not basically it's not the same place.
No, it should be the UBI compatible. Oh yeah, we're in Alpine now. Yeah, user. So it'll work as root, obviously, but then we can switch to.
So if you do an ls tac l on etc SSL certs, you see this is why we do all the dereferencing. We just go and take all of these symlinks and actually just generate a copy of them actually in the file in the file folder instead of all the symlinks throughout the rest of the system. So that's what Alpine actually does.
Yep. So I think I think it sounds a little bit safer to just chown the directory we want to write into for UBI rather than running as the root user on that container.
Yeah, because in the end, OpenShift is going to come back at us and be like, you can't do that.
Yeah, it makes sense. A little bit safer that way. So that works for me.
I have a feeling they'll complain less about us temporarily, changing the write access on a folder than they will literally going, you can't run as root. Stop it.
Yeah, exactly. And the benefit is that we're still compatible between either UBI or Debian-based because it's all going to SSL certs. So.
Could we use the same mount point as well if we just had the script copy it from the one to the other at the start?
Most likely. I mean, it obviously would need tested, but yeah.
I think that might be a little bit nicer just because in our case, the images are tagged with -UBI8, but people who are building them themselves may not be tagging them that way.
Yeah, I wavered between those options a little bit. It felt like the correct way to mount the correct directory for clarity, but that makes sense about end users building the image. So I can change that doc file to chown and also copy over into a compatible directory if running on UBI. And I guess that script will only run if that UBI compatible directory exists, because I don't think it would exist on a Alpine. So that should work.
The Alpine certificate script, you mean?
Yeah, the bundle certificates. I think what DJ is saying is instead of this logic here where we mount different paths, right? Always mount user local share. And then if we're in a UBI-8 tag image, and this directory will exist, therefore we'll copy the certs out from there into here so that update CA trust actually sucks it in. Is that what you're talking about, DJ?
Yep.
Right, because the final output from that is the actual et cetera SSL certs. That's what will end up, right? So this Alpine scripts runs, writes this into that, and then that ends up getting mounted to the rest of the containers. So we really don't care about the rest. We care about actually being able to get the content out.
Because at least from what I saw in UBI 8, update CA trust does not touch Etsy SSL certs on its own. I have to actually copy out the bundles that we want. Because what it's really looking at is like Etsy PKI SSL, something like that. And it's linked into Etsy SSL certs. So I actually have to copy this out into the compatible directory. Yeah.
Right, so that's basically the dereferencing script is effectively doing that same thing. It's going, oh, there's a symlink here. Let me go yank the original instead of having to worry about the symlink whatsoever. So you're effectively replicating that same kind of behavior.
Cool. Any other questions on this flow? Awesome. Thanks, everybody. The links to these MRs are in the demo notes if you're curious about them. And thank you all for watching. Have a good day.
Thank you.